Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Welcome to another edition of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, as always, Kevin Mahalik, and this is episode number 178. Episode 178 of the Baseball Podcast here on Thursday, April 9th. And episode 178 is going to be a good one today, ladies and gentlemen. We got an excellent show lined up for you here today. Kicking it off right away in our first segment, we'll be discussing the latest report out there between the MLB and the Players Association about how they're focusing on playing potentially in Arizona as early as May. A lot of people think that's ambitious, but we're going to get to that in much greater detail here in a second. After that, in our second segment, we're going to talk about the Strat-O-Matic simulation, the update there. Let you guys know what happened this week during that update so we can talk a little bit of fake baseball, but talk baseball in general. Then transitioning into our prediction segments 3 and 4. Today we're going to discuss the NL Rookie of the Year as well as the American League Rookie of the Year. I'll give you my prediction on both of those leagues. Some names that you haven't heard yet or you may not be aware of, but are going to jump onto the scene this year, maybe household names by year's end. And then we're going to wrap it up here with our fifth segment, talking about a few different things that Major League Baseball is doing currently to stay in the news. I give a couple of options that I think they could use based on some other leagues and what they're trying to put out there. And then finally, I'm going to wrap it up with our last segment talking about the top rivalries in Major League Baseball, according to myself. And yes, those will be skewed typically post-2000 here. You know, I'll be going off of my memories, the most recent events here and maybe not the overall history. But like I touched on here and jumping right into the GSMC Baseball Podcast, talking about the report that's out there where the MLB and the players are looking to essentially play in a bubble in Greater Phoenix, Arizona. We touched on in last week's episode how they're discussing different spring training facility locations. Well, as it seems, and it's becoming more and more obvious, that the state of Florida was a little bit late to the party when it comes to the stay-at-home and quarantine effects that were put into place. We've all seen the videos about the spring breakers down there and all the kids, and the beaches are packed in Clearwater weeks after the MLB has been sent home. So the state of Florida seems to still be on the uptick when it comes to this virus and COVID-19, as to where Phoenix and Arizona had a little bit of less traffic. They seem to have gotten the stay-at-home order in place to where things are stabilizing to where this may be a possibility. And the reason they're specifically talking about Phoenix is Chase Field, home of the Arizona Diamondbacks, it recently went to an artificial turf. It's no longer grass, so it will be able to play 3 games per day without being torn up completely, as well as within about, 45 or 50 miles of Phoenix, there's upwards of 10 spring training facilities. So at most, they could get 11 stadiums going at one time. So if you do doubleheaders on a couple of different facilities and then a triple header maybe at Chase Field, you'll be able to get in all the games that you're looking forward to play as many as possible. But diving into more of the bullet points that were in this report is it will just be players. There will be no family members, wives, kids, nobody else allowed into Phoenix, so to speak. It will only be essential player and personnel for the teams, and they will be sequestered at local hotels. I don't know how many total they're looking. I don't think it's one hotel per team, but I don't know if they want a bunch of these guys in one building. So that's still to be determined. But essentially, they're going to go from isolation in the hotel to the ballpark, back to the hotel, rinse and repeat day after day after day. The big hurdle that they need to get over here, and they're very well aware of it, is the rapid testing needs to be widely available. So the FDA just recently approved a test similar to like a diabetes prick on your finger, where it's able to determine if you have the virus within 5 to 15 minutes as opposed to 5 to 15 days. Now, the availability of this test is going to be a key part of it as well, because the MLB is looking to avoid what the NBA just went through recently, and that was, it looked like they were getting preferential treatment and preferential testing. People were basically dying elsewhere. Donovan Mitchell isn't showing any symptoms, but they had to test these guys to make sure. So the overall look in the greater scheme of things wasn't great for the NBA in that moment. So the MLB knows, hey, if we're going to test these guys literally every day, we need to know that this test can be mass produced to where, hey, the news isn't calling out, well, Major League Baseball is getting 1,000 of them a day, and here they are in this situation where they can't get them on site, and people are not getting the right treatment because of it. So this is certainly something that the MLB is well aware of. Some of the other changes that are currently being discussed is that of an electronic strike zone. They don't want the home plate umpire right next to the catcher, right next to the hitter. That's more bodies than could be. Well, personally, we can get into this here in a future episode, but the human element of baseball, the umpires, my suggestion is what we do at the Division III college level, the Division I college level at Lehigh when you're doing inter squads. Put the umpire behind the pitcher. Put him in the infield off just a little bit. Kids have done it growing up. Like I said, you always do it at Lehigh. Whoever was hurt typically did it so the coaches could coach and didn't have to worry about calling balls and strikes. If you let the catcher do it, things tend to get a little bit interesting. But if you have a guy behind the pitcher, he's able to see the zone perfectly. You can call him from there. Yes, maybe you got to run in for a play at the plate quick, but what the heck, if we're looking at safety, that's what I would do instead of going directly to an electronic strike zone. There's definitely going to be no mound visits allowed whatsoever. That's going to be whether they play in Arizona or wherever they play, whenever they play. This summer, there's certainly going to be no pitching coach mound visits. And honestly, pitching changes, I think, are going to be a little bit different as well. I don't know if the starting pitcher is going to be tossing the ball right to the manager coming out. There may be like hey, I'm waving him out, so you come in and you go, and then we'll talk to you, once you get back to the dugout. And speaking of the dugout, that term may change. The definition may change moving forward, because there was talk of, with the 6-foot social distancing rule, the players may go into the stands to sit in between innings or when their team is hitting, and not in the dugout where you can't be 6 feet apart. So everybody would be like, hey, you're over here. Okay, over 5 seats, up a seat, you're here. So just imagine, your favorite team, I'll say Bryce Harper's up there, guy on first, 2 outs, he hits a double, and all of a sudden you're going to hear all the teammates cheering from section 121. There's going to be no crowd there, but if it's on television, that live noise you're going to be hearing is the teammates going nuts in the stands. And no high fives when something good happens. That's going to be awkward for guys, barely even fist bumping. It's just going to be a lot of fist pumping instead of fist bumping. And just, oh man, just the visual of that seems almost fake and fairy tale-ish. But one last thing we talked about it briefly. It would be very, very surprising still if this were to be the case, but they're talking about 7-inning doubleheaders. If you got to play back-to-back games, go 7-7. Like I said at Lehigh, we went 7-9. I think that would be feasible, 7-9, 7-9. We did it for back-to-back days over the weekend, so there's no reason professionals wouldn't be able to do it. But all of those things being said, it still just seems to be a logistical nightmare for what they're trying to do. If one person gets the virus? Does that shut everything down? Like I said, every morning and every night, do they have to test to make sure everybody's clean? What if a security guard gets it down the right field line and not one of the players? Do they have to shut down that stadium? Do they then test or quarantine everybody for the next couple of weeks and they shift to another facility? It's just, I understand why MLB is trying to be at the forefront, trying to be the first sport that comes back. Their sport involves the most social distancing just naturally in its element. You know, first base, home plate, those are really the only areas where you're within 6 feet of one another for a longer period of time. So certainly things to still work through, but the fact that they're talking May, everybody believes June will be more feasible. I'm still standing pat on July 4th. I think it's really what we're looking at, and anything before that is super ambitious to discuss. But just to hear some of these, maybe they're putting them out in the media so we can talk about them, they can get some feedback. Overall, I'm just happy that the players and the MLB are still in communication. The goal is to still play as many games as possible and get back as soon as possible. But that wraps up the first segment here of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. We're going to pause right now for a word from one of our sister shows here within the network. When we come back, we're going to be talking Stratomatic simulation, giving you guys an update on what's going on. Stick with us here. I'm Kevin Mahalik, GSMC Baseball Podcast.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am Kevin Mahalik, your host, here on Thursday, April 9th. I appreciate everybody listening in today. Do me a favor really quick, if you haven't done so already, head to the social media pages, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, the GSMC Podcast Network, as well as the Baseball Podcast in particular. We're on every page. Give us a like, give us a follow, subscribe, wherever you're listening to on your podcast feed, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Click 5 stars as well. Write us a review. We had a recent review I want to read out there for all you listeners currently, just to give a shout out. Like I said, I've been asking you to do it. So if it comes up on there, let's see here. We got from Bridge Lynn. I appreciate Bridge reaching out here. 5-star review. Great podcast. Great content. Kevin is informative and a fun listen. Well, Bridge, I appreciate you reaching out via the review here. I appreciate the 5 stars. If you guys give a 5-star review, write something down here. I'll read it on the show as well. Give you some love. I love to hear it. Love the feedback. Bridge, I appreciate you listening. Hopefully you're staying safe during everything that's going on out there. But if you're just joining us, our first segment, we talked about the report where Major League Baseball is trying to get back as early as the month of May in the greater Phoenix area. A lot of hurdles to get over, a lot of logistical nightmares, a lot of potential downfalls. But other than all of that stuff, I think this is a great call and a great idea. But no, on a serious note, this is the only option they're going to have eventually. And like we talked about it, there's a few things that still need to be ironed out. But if they're going to get baseball, this is step one in the process of figuring out how to do so here the most responsible way in 2020. But here in segment number 2, we're going to talk about the Stratomatic simulation. We're going to continue through, give everybody an update on where we stand out there. It looks like here we are on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday simulation, recording this the night of April 8th. For you guys to listen to here on Thursday. We're going to have basically one more series to look at. Twins, Indians, Mariners, White Sox, Orioles, Yankees, Brewers, Reds, Cubs, Pirates, Marlins, Nationals, Blue Jays, Phillies, Rays, Red Sox, Padres, Braves, Dodgers, Cardinals. There you go. That's a good one. Detroit, Kansas City, Arizona, San Fran, and Oakland, LA Angels. And down, let's see, the 6th. Any surprises here? Let's go through it. Seattle loses to the White Sox. Cleveland beat the Twins. Baltimore loses to the Yankees. The Blue Jays upset the Phillies. Pittsburgh routs the Cubs 10-2. Minnesota wins 8-1. Cincinnati wins over Milwaukee 3-2. Tampa Bay over Boston 6-3. San Diego and Atlanta. Atlanta wins that one. LA Dodgers hammer St. Louis in that game 11-2. Kansas City 4-3. Arizona 4-1. And then Oakland 8-2 here. And any surprises as the records? Jose Barrios, he falls to 1-2 on the year for the Twins. That's a tough start for Jose. And the Bumgarner goes to 2-0 for Arizona. Mike Fiers goes to 2-0 for Oakland. He beats Teheran out there in L.A. Nice start here for Ryu. Goes to 1-0, only giving up 1 run and a nice start. Zach Britton gets the win, so it was a late win for the New York Yankees. But a nice little Wednesday there. And transitioning over to, that was Monday, so we're going to transition now to April 7th. Here we go, going down the simulations once again. Indians beat the Twins again. Odorizzi takes the loss. Seattle 8-6 over the White Sox this time. Garrett Cole, he gets the victory, improves to 1-1, 4-2 over Baltimore. Toronto, a romp, 11-2 over the Phils, the fighting Phils. Not doing that good early on. Chicago Cubs bounce back with a 5-3 victory. Yu Darvish gets on the board to get to 1-0 this year. Milwaukee beat Cincinnati 2-1. There's Minnesota. Minnesota. I don't know who that is. I can't read it. Tampa Bay, they beat Boston. Oliver Drake, 1-0. Good for Oliver. Played against him at college. He went to the Naval Academy. I played at Lehigh. We played against each other. San Diego beats Atlanta. LA Dodgers, they lose this time to the Cardinals. Kansas City, 10-2 over the Tigers. Jordan Zimmerman gets beat up once again to go to 1-2 on the year. Houston, 3-0 over the Mets, it looks like. Texas, 8-6. Arizona wins again. Mike Leake improves to 1-2. Johnny Cueto falls to 1-2 for San Fran. And then the Oakland A's win one more time to make it 4-2. That brings us to today, April 8th. Going through this one more time, and then we'll wrap up with some standings. Let you guys know where we're at this current time. All right. San Diego over Atlanta in a day game, 4-3. Baltimore beats the Yankees. Tanaka falls to 2-1. Tampa Bay, they improve to Blake Snell improves to 3-0 as they win 3-1. Minnesota now playing Cleveland, 8-7. They win in 11 innings, an extra inning affair. Detroit comes back, beats Kansas City. Seattle beats the White Sox. Let's see here. Washington beats Milwaukee. That's who it looks like. Pittsburgh beats Chicago in 13 innings. St. Louis again over the Dodgers. Houston over New York. San Fran over Arizona as Jeff Samardzija goes to 2-1. And then the Oakland A's win it. And sorry that was a little choppy out there. I'm trying to get through this here on Stratomatic. Zoom in. It's difficult even on a large computer screen, but jumping right into the standings here, see if things have stabilized themselves a little bit. In the AL East, the Tampa Bay Rays still lead that division at 9-3 with Boston, New York, and Baltimore all a few games back, right around 500. The Yankees are still the favorites there to eventually figure it out, but Tampa's a solid ball club, so seeing them out to 9-3, not super surprising. Cleveland at 10-3, as well as Kansas City at 8-3. Those would both surprise myself. Minnesota starting 5-8 would certainly be disappointing, but we've seen the White Sox and Detroit down in the basement there. Oakland 10-3. That's an early push for them. Usually they start slow and then turn things on later in the year. But Texas and Houston behind them, a couple and a half games at 7-5. Jumping over to the National League, Washington still leading the NL East at 8-4. Miami 6-7, fighting Phils 5-7. The Braves at 5-8. That would be obviously a disappointment through 13 games in Atlanta, as I picked them to win about 100 games this year. So Atlanta starting 5-8. Whew, I wouldn't have seen that coming. The Cubbies at 8-4, St. Louis 7-5, Pittsburgh 7-5. Everybody's bundled up together in the NL Central. That's anybody's ball game. We talked about that during the preseason, that the Central could be one of the tightest divisions. The San Diego Padres at 10-3. That would mean a lot of these people have arrived, and they're ahead of pace out there. They would have to play the Dodgers a ton yet, so I wouldn't get super excited, but the Dodgers second place at 7-5. Arizona, Colorado, and San Fran all bringing up the rear there as well. So jumping into some individual statistics right off the bat, leading the league in hitting, we got Jorge Soler, 442, Brett Gardner, 442, Jimenez and Robert for the Chicago White Sox at 438 and 429. We got 8 people still hitting over 400. Leading the league in home runs, Jimenez for the White Sox with 7. Reyes, Springer, and Soler with 6. And Bichette with 6 right behind him. RBIs, Jimenez, Soler, Mondesi up the top there in the American League. And then let's see if we can get over to the National League. Got to keep scrolling down here. Now we're on to the pitching, but I want to talk hitting in the National League. Maybe that was everybody. I don't know. Okay, still trying to figure this out. Obviously, where they put everything here online, how to best maneuver it, all of that good stuff. Let's see. Pitching. Should we get some pitching statistics here? Yes, we can. All right, there we go. David Price, 0.0 ERA. Snell for Tampa Bay, 0.48. Gallen, Shoemaker, Strasburg. Holy moly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people with an ERA under 1 already 2 to 3 starts into this year. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that out there. I'll clean that up moving forward, kind of figure out how to best position, talk about what's going on, whether it'll be individual statistics or standings, breaking down particular teams and what's going on. But we're trying to talk anything baseball. I'm trying to talk to you guys about standings, what's going on, who's surprising, who's not. If guys weren't performing like this, how would we feel? So hopefully you enjoyed that here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast. I am your host, Kevin Mahalik. Hang with us here. We're going to pause for a word from one of our sister shows within the GSMC Podcast Network. And when we get back, on the flip side, I'm going to talk to you guys about the NL Rookie of the Year. Who's going to win it? It's up for debate, so hang with us.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Kevin Mahalik. I appreciate you listening today, Thursday, April 9th. We are talking all things baseball here. The first segment, we talked about the report at the MLB's trying to come back as early as May and play in the greater Phoenix, Arizona area. They got 10 spring training facilities within about 45 to 50 miles, and they're essentially trying to get all the players together, hotel to the park, back to the hotel. That's it. Tests involve almost daily. How do they do this? Can they get it with local health officials, local government officials? Everybody involved is communicating, and they're on the path to trying to figure this out. Everybody still believes May is an ambitious time frame, but the month of June, it could be reasonable here. So we'll see. They continue to discuss reports. We'll continue to talk about them here on the podcast as they become available. Last segment, I touched on the update for the Stratomatic simulation, how they're doing, whose teams, are surprising people here early on, who are not. It's tough, guys, out there. We're hoping to talk about games by now, so I'm talking about artificial intelligence and simulations of games. So I appreciate you hanging with us here. If you haven't done so yet, do me a favor, head to the social media, like, subscribe, review, rate, all of the above, everything you do in 2020 to help out us here at the podcast. We appreciate it. So transitioning now into our preview prediction here, our segment number 3 of the baseball podcast. Today we're going to talk about the National League Rookie of the Year. I did MVPs and Cy Youngs. Now we're going to talk about Rookie of the Year. Last year, Pete Alonso won the National League Rookie of the Year. He was 1 vote shy of being a unanimous selection. That vote went to Mike Soroka, starting pitcher for the Atlanta Braves, who finished second. Third place finisher was Fernando Tatis, but it was Pete Alonso's award. And it wasn't really that close, but that got me thinking when I was talking about names who could potentially jump out this year, looking back to 2018 Pete Alonso to see if, hey, should we have seen this coming? And a little bit of yes, a little bit of no. In 2018, he played in AA and AAA. He hit the cover off the ball in AA, hit .314, hit .440 on base percentage. His OPS was over 1,000. They moved him up about halfway through the year to AAA, where he still performed well, but the average wasn't, as high as it was in AA. But his AAA numbers and his big league numbers are eerily similar. Listen to this here. 19 in the bigs, 18 in AAA. Average 260, 260. On base percentage, 358, 355. Slugging percentage, 585, 583 for an OPS of 941 and 941. So for the last year and a half, he's a 260 hitter with a 355 on base percentage and an OBP of 941. Pretty insane. Now he hit a total of 36 home runs across 2018. That number went up to 53 last year, which was a rookie record with 120 RBIs, which is why he ran away with it. But I'm just saying that, we didn't see these power numbers being there, but we did see the performance in the minors. We did get a little bit of a glimpse into the future that we should have saw this coming, at least a little bit from Pete Alonso. So transitioning into some of the names here for 2020 and what we can see or expect to see at the top of the list, I gave you guys a top 3. Then I have a value pick and a long shot pick to talk about who I think could potentially take home the award. And starting out at the top is one of the overall top prospects in baseball, and that's Gavin Lux, who is a second baseman for the Dodgers and is penciled in to be the full-time starter this year. Going back to last season, he hit .392 in AAA in 49 games. So he didn't just do it for a couple of weeks. That's upwards of about 2 months, 50 games in 60 days, about 2 months hitting .392 is very impressive. And yes, he doesn't have the power numbers. I talked about it. He plays second base, so he's a little bit more of the scrap doubles hitter, gap guy, doubles, triples, speed prospect. He's the number 2 overall prospect in baseball, depending on which outlet you're looking at, which scouting service you're communicating with. And the one drawback that I do see on Gavin is he did get a taste in the majors last year. He played in 23 games in the big league level, and he only hit .240 in those games. Now, .392 to .240 is a big, big dip. And I don't know if Gavin was putting a little bit too much pressure on himself, if he was trying to perform at that high of a level. He knew the Dodgers wanted him for a little bit of a spark. He wasn't going to play every day, and I think a little bit of too much pressure on himself was the reason there, and I think now, hey, second base is your job. This team's going to win 100 games. We're loaded with MVPs scattered throughout the roster. All-stars all throughout the roster. Just play your game, hit the baseball, don't try to do too much. So I think we're going to see a little bit closer to that 392 effort than the 240 effort we saw at the big league level. But next up, I have Mackenzie Gore, a left-handed pitcher for the San Diego Padres. He's penciled in. Now that the season is shortened, I would believe, or I would assume, that he's going to be up and be ready for when they start to get to go. There was talks that he could start in AAA, but a big left-handed pitcher, averages 93 to 95 on his fastball, so doesn't overpower you or blow you away with speed, but 95, able to locate over 100 right down the middle. I'll take any day of the week. He's got 4+ pitches. All of them, curveball, slider, changeup, fastball, I believe it is the repertoire for the 4 of them, all plus. It's just if the Padres make a push this year, if their offense with Tatis, Hosmer, Machado, if they can put it together, he can make a little bit of a run. I think McKenzie's going to be there at the end of the year in the conversation. Next up, I have Carter Kieboom, third baseman for the Washington Nationals. Third base, Nationals, that's right. Anthony Rendon moves on to the LA Angels. That means Carter's going to move right in. Last year he hit .303 in AAA. If he continues to play a solid third base for Washington, and if he gives you anything close to what Anthony Rendon gave you last year, if he ends up in the middle of that lineup with Juan Soto making a push, you're going to say, hey, no wonder they didn't pay Rendon all this money. They got this kid Kieboom who can come in here and perform, I'm not going to say up to that level, but close to that level for certainly a fraction of the price. And that would be worthy of Rookie of the Year conversation. So next up, my value pick a little bit further down. If you're looking at the sports books, wherever you're at out there, if it's legal, do your thing. It is here in Pennsylvania, so I continue to bring it up in passing. Dylan Carlson, St. Louis, he's an outfielder, probably going to play left field for them. He was more of a high school phenom, strictly a left-handed hitter now. Came out as a switch hitter out of high school. Tried it a few years early on here in the minor leagues, and they seem to stick him now on the left side where he started to find his groove last year at the high levels in the minor leagues. So a full off season of dedicating to strictly left-handed hitting, another year of confidence in that side of the plate, I think could lead to a nice year for Dylan. But my long shot, I'm not sure. It may not be a best bet, but that's why it's a long shot, is Joey Bart, the catcher out of Georgia Tech, number 2 overall pick a few years back. He's with San Francisco. He's going to take over for Buster Posey. Now, I know Posey's behind the dish, supposed to be behind the dish now, but if this Joey Bart kid comes in hitting the cover off the ball, you can move Posey down to first base sooner than later, and now you're having a conversation here about Bart behind the plate. If this Giants team isn't at the bottom of the NL West, he's going to be a big reason why. All he's done is hit throughout the minor league level, so you assume that's going to continue once he hits the big leagues. But the guy to beat is Gavin Lux for the Dodgers. He's the heavy favorite in the clubhouse. Like I said, hit .392 in AAA. Only .240 in the bigs, but people are kind of, willing to look over that, thinking they're going to get the guy doubles, triples, almost hitting .400 in AAA. So Gavin Lux is the safest bet out there. And Dylan Carlson, Mackenzie Gore, Joey Bart, a few other value picks and long shots. But Gavin Lux is the guy to beat in the clubhouse for NL Rookie of the Year in 2020. We'll see if it's a little bit closer than last year where, like I said, Pete Alonso was one shy of a unanimous selection. But that wraps up the third segment here of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. We're going to pause for a brief word from one of our sister shows here within the podcast network, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the other league. We're going to talk about American League Rookie of the Year, where in 2019 that one was unanimous. So are any of these going to be an open competition? I think 2020 in the American League, that's exactly what we're going to get. So hang with us here for just a second. We'll be right back.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Hello and welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Hopefully you enjoyed the content so far out there. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik, talking all things Major League Baseball. Starting off today with the report, MLB trying to play in Arizona in May. Whew, that's going to be tough. There's a lot of potential pitfalls, a lot of hurdles to get over, but I like where this is going, and you can't have a season until you have an idea. And in Arizona, kind of sequestered is certainly the best idea. Now it's just a matter of ironing out all the details. So we'll continue to talk about that further and further as we come along here and more information is available. We then talked about the simulation our friends are doing at Stratomatic, where we're at, the standings, individual stats, trying to talk anything on the field, anything baseball with you guys out there. So hopefully you enjoyed following along there. Last segment, I touched on NL Rookie of the Year, Pete Alonso in 2019, and Gavin Lux is your pick for 2020, according to myself here and the Baseball Podcast. Now we're going to talk American League, where the winner in 2019 was unanimous. In this case, Pete Alonso was one vote short. Yordan Alverez won the award in the American League with one of the more impressive half seasons in the history of Major League Baseball. You know, Pete Alonso played a full 161 and a 162. Well, Alonso only played 87 and still won the award, a half a season, and was a unanimous Rookie of the Year winner. He played 56 games at AAA in 2019 after 45 there in 2018. And just listen to this jump that was made from 18 to 19 at the AAA level. 8 home runs, 28 RBIs in pretty much the same amount of games. Last year, 23 and 71. Went from hitting 259 to 343. Carried that over to the big league level where he hit 313, 412 on base percentage, 655 slugging for an OPS of 1067. And for those of you out there who don't know OPS, on base plus slugging, anything over 900 is fantastic, and over 1,000 is just insane to think about. But Alvarez also set a record. He beat a record Ted Williams set in 1939, and that is the most RBIs in your first 45 games. Yordan Alverez had 51 RBIs. Teddy Williams had 47 in 1939. So almost 90 years. Is that what that math is? 80 years? Just about 80 years later. Exactly 80 years later. It's finally beat by Yordan Alverez. Here I am thinking it was 2020, but no, 2019, 80 years later. Just insane to think about that record finally falls. But who was second? That's the question for you guys out there. I had no idea. I could have given you Alvarez. I had no clue who was second. Well, it was John Means in Baltimore. And who? John Means? Exactly. That's where he finished second. Let's see, pulling up his statistics from last year. He's a pitcher for the Orioles. And he was 12 and 11 with a 3.6 ERA. And that's a good year for Baltimore, where they were last year, being 500. So shout out to John Means. So transitioning here into 2020, I like these lists a little bit better than the Cy Young and MVP lists because you're going to hear new names. Can't win Rookie of the Year twice. You don't qualify. So the list this year, number 1 and number 1A, according to your sports books out there and according to myself, are a pair of Chicago White Sox. First, you have Luis Robert. He's an outfielder for the White Sox. Last year in the minors, he hit .328 with 32 home runs and 36 steals. A little bit of a Ronald Acuna style to him, going 30-30. Now they're thinking in the big league level, maybe he's not going to hit that many dingers, but he could have a ton of steals. Either way, if you get to 30-30, 40-30, or 30-40, whatever it may be, as a rookie, that's going to win you a lot of awards. So that puts him there at the top. And the reason I have him and his teammate Michael Kopech 1A is because Kopech's coming off a Tommy John surgery. He's a starting pitcher. In my eyes, it's a little bit more difficult for a starting pitcher to win this award than a player who plays every day. John Means, Yordan Alverez, kind of case in point, but obviously Alvarez was head and shoulders above everybody. But if the White Sox are dealing, they end up making the playoffs. Robert and Kopech are both lights out. I think Robert gets the nod because he's there every day. I think people look at Kopech and go, yeah, once every 5 days he's lights out, but Robert's doing it day in and day out. They don't win this many games without Robert, even if Kopech throws every 5th day. But you got to throw Kopech up at the top just based on stuff and electricity alone. He had his first outing in 18 months this spring off of Tommy John surgery, like I touched on, and 6 of his 11 pitches hit triple digits. They were 100 miles an hour or over. So the arm is feeling good. It's easy heat. It's nice mechanics, but it's just a matter of if the human body can physically throw 100 miles an hour over and over, year after year after year. Noah Syndergaard is the latest one to kind of show you that Tommy John's going to happen sooner or later, and potentially more than once if you're Michael Kopech. But those are your top 2 favorites in the American League. The next tier, Casey Mize, number 1 overall pick in 2018 out of Auburn, a starting pitcher for the Detroit Tigers. The only question I have with Casey is I don't think his team is going to be able to win enough for him to win this award. Again, starting pitchers in Baltimore, struggle bus of a team last year, 12-11 was good enough for second for John Means. So if you're looking at Casey Mize thinking 13-9, 13-8, that's going to put him in the conversation because is Detroit going to win more than 60 games? Is this guy going to have a third of their wins by winning 15 games this year? That's where, you vault yourself up the scoreboard here. But the way Detroit's built, they're far from contention. The White Sox are closer, so I give them the edge in that team aspect of this award. The third guy here is Brendan McKay. So Brendan McKay is still rookie eligible, even though he played a ton of games last year. He actually is still eligible by 1 inning. He was 1 inning short of not qualifying for this award, and because of this, he's comfortable in the bigs. He's thrown in big spots. He's had starts in August, September coming down the stretch, so he's going to know what he can do, as well as being a left-handed pitcher and a DH. You're getting that Shohei Ohtani aspect that I talked about in the MVP award. If you go 10-4 on the bump, hit 300 with some dingers in the DH role in between there, that's going to get you up the list here for Rookie of the Year. But I do think the voters in the back of their mind are going to go, how's that guy still a rookie? I'm not giving it to him, which is why I have him a little bit down the list. And my value pick in the American League, Joe Adell, outfielder, LA Angels. Obviously playing out there in L.A. with all of those names, Anthony Rendon, Mike Trout, Albert Pujols, Upton, out in the outfield. Adell is going to be the young guy mixed in there, playing probably right field. They got him in left. I would assume Trout in center, Upton in right, put Adell out in left. The Angels could surprise people as a team, and if Adell puts together a performance out in the outfield and is that spark that potentially gets them into playoff conversation or over the hump, that could garner him some votes coming down the stretch. And then my long shot, Nate Pearson, starting pitcher for the Toronto Blue Jays. He's got electric stuff, wipeout stuff. Like I talked about, the Yankees are the class of that division. That next tier is up for debate after Tampa, them there, but then Boston, Baltimore, Toronto, If Toronto puts it together, ends up finishing third, flirts with some wild card, it's going to be their pitching that gets them there. The offense is more loaded on the name aspect, but they're going to need the likes of Pearson to put it together if they're really going to make a run. So ultimately, I do think it comes down to Robert or Kopech for the Chicago White Sox. Once again, I'm going to go Robert because he plays every day. Kopech coming off the Tommy John surgery. I just don't trust that injury enough. I don't trust him coming off of 18 months of not playing competitive baseball to go out and be able to locate his electric stuff, even though it is 100 miles an hour. If you can't get in hitters count, or if you're always in hitters counts, 2-0, 3-1, even if it's 100, people will find it, people will hit it, and Luis Robert going 32 and 36, hitting 328 last year. If he's anywhere close to those numbers, that's a W in the Rookie of the Year award. So who do you think's going to win it out there? Let me know. Reach out to us on the social media. Hit us up on Twitter. Give me your thoughts. If you think anybody besides those 5 individuals I mentioned have a shot, Luis Robert, Gavin Lux in the National League, based on the previous segment, who do you think's taking it? But that wraps up the 4th segment here of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. We're going to pause one more time for another word from one of our sister shows. When we come back, it's a little bit of our hot spot for MLB talk. The NBA is talking about a game of horse being televised. Well, I got some ideas for Major League Baseball on how to get on TV and how to make some cash and keep people entertained while we're in this coronavirus pandemic. So hang with us here. You're going to want to hear that. We'll be right back.
Are you looking to get your college football fixed? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to another segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Today is Thursday, April 9th. I am your host, Kevin Mahalik. I appreciate you guys listening in here today. Hopefully you're staying safe with everything that's going on out there. Depending on where you are in the United States, this is affecting everybody slightly different. New York, New Jersey, things are getting crazy. Things are getting wild. Hopefully, if you're in that area, stay home. Give a shout out to the healthcare workers who are out there at the front of the lines. If you're in the Midwestern part of the country, things are a little bit slower, a little bit more normal, shall I say, out there. Less big cities, less numbers for the coronavirus than on the East Coast. Myself here, Greater Philadelphia, Philly's doing okay. We're still increasing, not at a rapid exponential rate that is seen in the likes of New York City, what's happening in Chicago recently, down in Florida, New Orleans and Louisiana, seeing an uptick. So hang in there wherever you are. I know we have listeners throughout the country, internationally as well, being affected, everybody by this, and not just one of us. So give a shout out to a healthcare worker call them, give them your thanks, FaceTime your friends, your family, have a virtual happy hour. That's what my wife's been doing with her friends. I've been trying to set it up with some of my buddies. Get on Zoom, get on FaceTime, get on whatever app, allows you to communicate, try to, have some sort of communication and resemblance of normalcy and trying to keep, your mental health, where it needs to be, because as we're getting into weeks 3, 4, 5, whatever it may be here, again, wherever you're located, things, I know the walls can start to get a little bit closer if you're in an apartment, don't have a backyard to get to. Everybody has their different situation and different scenario that they're dealing with, and just keep fighting, keep staying home, try to flatten the curve and let this healthcare system do the best it can to get everybody through this. I'm going to continue to bring you guys content. Hopefully I'm a bit of a reprieve for you guys listening out there. I know recording this is one of the moments I look forward to. It's kind of back to normal. You escape it here a little bit, talking Major League Baseball. Some of you out there are going, how can you talk sports with everything going on? Well, hey, it's a mental health thing for me too. Talking to you guys about who's going to win Rookie of the Year. It may sound foolish at this point in a time where we don't know if they're going to have a season at all. But it's just, again, 10 minutes of myself mentally where I get back into a little bit of a happy zone and just escape everything that's going on out there day in and day out. So I appreciate you guys listening. I really do. If you haven't done so, give us a review on the podcast. That helps myself. It helps GSMC continue to grow, spread the word, and do everything we can to bring you guys quality content, not only with baseball, but across the board in sports, which you've heard with our advertisements, as well as movies, news, anything you can think of, social media. GSMC's got an option for you to check out there. But jumping in here to this fifth segment, like I talked about, a little bit of a mashup from a bunch of different thoughts, but where I want to start is a recent report came out from the NBA that they're discussing playing a horse competition, or pig, P-I-G, whatever it is you play out there, where players from their own personal gyms would be playing horse virtually against one another. Hey, okay, here's the shot, Steph Curry. Now you try it, LeBron. That sounds good. Well, I got to thinking myself, within the game of baseball, is there a way to do a home run derby individually? I know some of the parks are closed for the community aspect of it, but is there a way where, these guys could get to a local park with one other individual, somehow get them tested between ESPN? Okay, we need one camera guy, one reporter, a hitter, and a pitcher. That's 4 people, so that's under the 10 mark where you'd be able to gather. Nobody needs to field the ground balls. Nobody needs to be catching them. You need one camera. Nobody's going to be within 6 feet of each other. Get everybody tested at the beginning of the day so you're good to go. The ball player has baseballs, has an L screen, has his bat. Set up the camera behind him, and let's go swing off, home run derby style. 5 swings, 7 swings, 10 swings, whatever it is. Let me see Bryce Harper go at it with Joey Gallo. Let me see Ronald Acuna Jr. He goes first. We watch him from behind. It's on ESPN. We see his 5 swings. They tell us there whether or not it was a home run or not, because we can't zoom in or change camera angles, do all of this different stuff. That's fine. Just put it behind the dish. Have the pitcher throw into a net. We don't need a catcher by the hitter. He's got his bat that he's been working with at home. And then once the round's over, then the guys go out and they go pick up the balls. They walk around, they throw them back into a bucket. Again, they're the only ones to touch it, the only ones to interact. Bryce Harper goes, he takes 7 swings, he gets 4 home runs. All right, now it's Ronald Acuna's turn. So he goes. Everybody watches him. Oh, now we got a swing off. It's a virtual home run derby. Why can't we do this? If we're doing horse or a dunking contest, you could certainly do a home run derby style of it. Make it a bracket over the course of 3 or 4 days. Get 32 guys, 64 guys. Have them go at it over the course of an hour, because 10 swings is going to take 5 minutes. Not even. Yeah, they're going to be lobbing it in there. There's no time. Just do swings, I guess. Or if you want to do time, because I like that aspect of the home run derby, do time. Have them swinging everything. Just do time. Don't have to wait for the ball to land, because nobody's going to get hurt while they're trying to catch the ball. That's why they have to wait for the actual home run derby. It's a pop-up. They got the kids out there in the outfield waiting to catch it. And if you hit a line drive, you're going to hit them. It's the same rule within BP. You don't look up, or you wait till it's caught, then you throw the next pitch. Well, there's nobody out there catching, so keep rapid firing. Let's go. Let's see as many as we can get. Let's get a bracket of 32 here. Break it on down. Let's do it over a weekend. 10 a.m. it's these 2. 10:30 it's these 2. 11 it's these 2. I think it could be an option that nobody's even talked about to this point. And then from a non-home run derby perspective, can you get a trick shot? Maybe throws? Outfielders from right field got to hit a target, had home plate, or one hop off the scoreboard on this throw, or you got an infielder doing a jump throw across. I don't know how else you could do it besides a home run derby. I'm trying to think of it here, but outfielders throwing home. Hey, they hit the target 3 out of 5 times. Now you're up. Or, fastest throw, longest throw, whatever you want to do here. I'm just trying to think of ways that ESPN can partner with Major League Baseball. Let's get these guys mic'd up. Let's have them talk trash to each other, almost video game style. Can we do a bat control game? Here's the rules. You got to complete these 10 tasks. Fly ball to right, fly ball to left, ground ball to second, ground ball to third. Who thinks of the MVP 2005 EA Sports, I think it was PlayStation 2 video game where you had that where you'd hit the ramps, and depending on how far you'd go, or you hit this bus or this car, you'd get a certain amount of points. It was just fun to watch and fun to compete in. So, maybe you give them targets out in the outfield, big circles out there, and if you hit it in the circle or to the right of this line, to the left of this line, in between these lines is a certain amount of points. Try to make some sort of game with BP, with batting practice, with a home run derby to keep everybody entertained, because right now all we really have is these players playing video games on Twitch. Most recently, there was a MLB The Show tournament where Amir Garrett, relief pitcher for the Cincinnati Reds, the same guy who started that little spat with the Pittsburgh Pirates, he won the show. So, he won in video games, and you really don't want to talk trash to him because he's willing to drop the gloves, which we saw last summer as well. But they put that on Twitch. A few other big leaguers who are entertaining everybody out there, communicating with the fans, trying to stay engaged, trying to find other avenues of revenue, because you can make money by a certain amount of streams, subscribers, playing video games. The likes of Blake Snell, pitcher for the Rays, has been on there. Trevor May, a relief pitcher for the Twins. Carlos Rodon has done it out there. Hunter Pence, who everybody knows the name. So really all we've had to look forward to is these guys playing games on Twitch, playing MLB The Show. And I'm out here trying to figure out a way to get them actually on the field, get a camera involved, and still maintain all aspects of social distancing. But I think a home run derby, March Madness bracket challenge, pitcher, hitter, camera guy, maybe even not a camera guy, maybe just a camera reporter, and that's all you need. Get them tested in the morning, they're good to go. Do it over the course of a weekend, and we have ourselves a show. We got some entertainment. So let me know if you guys have any ideas out there. DM me on Twitter, hit us up on Facebook. If there's some good ones, we'll read them here on the show. But that wraps up another segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast here on the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. As always, I appreciate everybody listening out there. We're winding the show down here. We got one more segment to go after one last word from one of our sister shows. For the 6th and final segment, having a little bit of fun, I'm going to talk about the top 5 rivalries in Major League Baseball. And yes, you guys know them all already out there. I'm going to talk about my favorite moments, which makes them top 5 for myself. And we'll have some fun wrapping up the show. But Kevin Mahalik here, GSMC Baseball Podcast. Thanks for listening, everybody. Hang with us.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
welcome back to the sixth and final segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. I appreciate you guys listening. It is Thursday, April 9th, if you're listening on release date. If not, shortly thereafter. Hopefully you're enjoying the second week of April as we head more and more into the spring season here. We touched on 70 degrees in the greater Philadelphia area today for maybe the first, second time this spring, as we're trying to tick upwards, trying to get outside more, even though, of course, following the social distancing 6 feet that everybody's supposed to be doing out there. But for now, getting you guys more quality content within the baseball podcast. Another excellent show today. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. I gave you guys my thoughts on everybody playing in Arizona as early as the month of May. That's crazy. There's no way it happens in May. June would be the earliest, and I'm still sitting on July 4th for my prediction. We then talked about the Stratomatic simulation, giving you all the update up there. A few surprises still early on, 13 games into the simulation, but hey, something to talk about, and I enjoyed that. Next up, I predicted the NL and AL Rookie of the Years. This year, I think they'll be a little bit closer than last year. We're out of a total of 60 between the two. 59 out of 60 went to two guys. Yordan Alverez and Pete Alonso walked away with it. This year, I'm giving Gavin Lux the advantage for the National League, and then Luis Robert of the Chicago White Sox in the American League are the early favorites. Last segment, I talked about how I think that the MLB should do like a home run derby style of game of horse. The NBA's talking about playing remotely, virtually, while maintaining social distancing. I'm thinking the MLB can put together a home run derby swing-off bracket challenge very similarly, no problem, at local facilities, wherever these guys are. So, our sixth and final segment here, we tend to have some fun on the baseball podcast. I'm going to give you guys a top 5 here today of the best rivalries currently in baseball, or the ones that, at least hit home the most for myself. And I say that because what I'm going to talk about is basically my memories from the year 2000, 2003 on for these rivalries as to why they're at the top of this list here. And the top 3, everybody knows, they are universal. But numbers 5 and 4 could surprise some individuals out there, and that's where we'll start. Start at 5, work our way down to number 1. Number 5, we got the Lone Star Showdown, I think is what they're calling it there. The Houston Astros and the Texas Rangers. Now, this one's even more recent, as in kind of the last 5, 10, I think it's 8 years now. The Astros used to be in the National League. Then they rearranged everything, 2012, I believe it was, and the Astros are now in the AL West and play the Rangers routinely. Up until that point, it was only interleague play, so they really couldn't get that rivalry going. But now, this is getting better and better. These teams really don't like each other. From the brawl in 2015, Prince Fielder was involved. A.J. Hinch, manager, pushing Fielder because Texas was talking smack to him. Odor got into a fight. Absolutely. They were talking trash where Houston has Houston on their chest, but with the Rangers, we get to put Texas. And then the pushback was, that's because nobody knows where Arlington is. And it's just a nice banter of words. The Rangers had their run there ever so briefly, didn't win the ultimate prize, but got to the ALCS a couple of years at the expense of the Astros. And then now the shoe is on the other foot. The Astros aren't losing 100 games anymore. They're winning 100 games, and the Rangers are not very good. So there hasn't been a time yet where they've really come together and met late in the postseason. But if and when they do, that's going to be a ton of fun because the war of words is definitely growing year over year there. But number 4 on the list, again, you'll learn I'm biased, local flavor, but I think this is one nationally people would discuss as well, and that's the Phillies and the Mets. This one goes back to kind of 2005 through 2011, really in its heyday. Recently, yes, they still don't like each other, but the Phillies haven't been competitive for the past 8 years or so, being over 500. But all the way back to 2006, when Billy Wagner signed with the Mets from the Phillies, it didn't sit well in Philadelphia. So a lot of people were chirping to the media, chirping at the Mets. The Mets had their year in 2006. This then led to 2007, Jimmy Rollins preseason labeling the Phillies as the team to beat even though the Mets, based on the media, were preseason favorites. Well, Rollins wasn't looking so hot when there were 17 games left to play and the Phillies were 7 games back. But then the New York Mets do what they do best. They choke down the stretch. The Phillies come back to win in 07, win the NL East. They come back the next year in 08. Carlos Beltran fires at the Phillies. They got, I believe it was Johan Santana added to the squad. They thought they were good. They were the team to beat. Once again, we're in September. The Mets are in first place as late as September 19th. They falter down the stretch. The Phillies play well. The Phillies end up making the postseason, winning the World Series, and then that starts the run of 08, 09, 10, and 11, where they were NL East champions, and the Mets, were no longer to be heard. So that was a fun little 5-year run where they would go back and forth down deep into September, postseason implications on the line. Just fun baseball, fun times, and a fun rivalry. And to this day, Phillies and Mets, they really don't get along, and it's fun to beat them whenever they can. So the top 3, everybody knows, we'll touch on here. Number 3, the Cubs and the Cardinals. This one is the Midwest version. We got an East Coast, a West Coast, and a Midwest version of these rivalries here in the top 3. My memory of this rivalry stems to 1998, the Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa home run chase year. Who was going to break the record? Were they both going to break it? Who was going to hit more down the stretch? And kind of the cherry on top on this rivalry was that McGwire actually broke the record while playing the Cubs. So McGwire's running around the bases celebrating. Then he gets congratulated by Sammy Sosa as he's breaking the record. Sosa's trying to break and would break. I don't know if you can say break because McGwire did, but would pass, 61 total home runs as well. McGwire ends at 70, Sosa at 66 that year. And the Cardinals, they tend to dominate that series. Even recently, in my memory, the Cubs obviously have won World Series. The Cardinals have 2 or 3 in my greater lifetime, 10 overall, I believe it is, compared to 2 for Chicago. So a heavy lean there for the Redbirds, but I always like when they get together. There seems to be something on the line on the NL Central. One of the two is always at the top of the division, if not both of them, and it's a fun series whenever it takes place. And number 2, I have the West Coast version, Dodgers versus Giants. This stems back to like 2004 for me. It went down to the last weekend of the year where the Dodgers then won the division over the Giants. But big picture, I was looking at this, and this is something that would upset me as a Dodgers fan for sure, and something I would use as a Giants fan in this argument is since 2008, the Dodgers have appeared in 6 National League Championship Series. So 6 out of the 12 every other year, or 11, whatever the math is there. 6 out of 11, but 0 World Series titles. So they've been there 6 times, 1-0. And the Giants, they have 3 NLCS appearances in the last 12 years. They also have 3 World Series championships. Every time they make it, they win the gosh darn thing. The Dodgers always make it and never win it. So even though right now the Dodgers are dominating and have been dominating in the last 3 to 5 years, they've still never won. So as a Giants fan, you're going, yeah, man, win all you want. We got the 3 rings. We're dominating over you in the last 10 years. That's just a fascinating dynamic of how LA is there all the time, never wins. The Giants were there in 10, 12, and 14 and won all 3 of those. So that's just, man, that would annoy me as a Dodgers fan. And then number 1, the best rivalry in baseball as we know it, New York Yankees, Boston Red Sox. It's going to be a down year for this one. But this goes back to 2003, 2004. For myself as a 16, 17-year-old, I think 15 years old at that time, Pedro throwing Don Zimmer to the ground. Yankees winning 7 in 2003. Aaron Boone off of Tim Wakefield, a walk-off home run. They eventually lost to the Marlins in the World Series. But then you come right back the next year. Boston's down 3-0. Dave Roberts steals second. They win Game 4. Goes to Game 5. They win again. All of a sudden 6. We're back in the bloody sock game. Now we're going to Game 7. Johnny Damon ends up hitting a couple of dingers. Boston goes on to win their first World Series in 86 years. And just back-to-back ALCS matchups, going the distance, going the full 7 games. So much fun to watch. just electric as a teenager, getting you involved with the game of baseball. And still to this day, I love that documentary, 4 Nights in Boston, or whatever it was talking about that. But top 5 rivalries, you guys got it out there. Astros, Rangers, Phillies, Mets, Cubs, Cardinals, Dodgers, Giants, Yankees, Red Sox. I don't know if anybody can argue with me, especially with those top 3, maybe 4 and 5, depending on where you're listening from and who your local squad is out there. But those are the top 3 across the board. So hopefully you enjoyed the show today. The GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, as always, Kevin Mahalik. This wraps up episode 178 of the Baseball Podcast. I appreciate everybody listening out there. Do me a favor, share us on social media, write us a review, give us a follow, a like, subscribe. It helps. It goes a long way. I appreciate everything you guys are doing out there. Please stay safe and enjoy the rest of your night, and I'll talk to you guys on Monday.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.